Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to episode 10 of the Believers Early Careers podcast. This is your brother, Rahu Ali, the early talent man. Quick personal update. I was struck with COVID, hence the delay in releasing this episode, basically. But all is well now, alhamdulillah. Can't complain. So today's episode, we speak to brother Umayr, who is a degree apprentice. So, we speak to someone who's, I guess, doing the best of both worlds, where, you're doing a degree, it's being paid for, you're on a salary, working full time, getting the experience, and pretty much having a permanent job towards the end, which is a very appealing thing. And I think, many more of us in our community should be considering this opportunity and should sort of be aware of how one should go about approaching such opportunities. He's currently doing a software developer degree apprenticeship at BT, and he started last year, so he's still relatively new. And I think the insight he gives is very valuable. We sort of discuss his journey towards the apprenticeship, how his family encouraged him to go for an apprenticeship instead of going for university, and sort of how it started from the age of 7, where he, alongside his family, moved to Egypt for a few years. Then we talk about the actual apprenticeship, what it's like, what the learning is like, what day-to-day looks like, the application process, tips on how to apply, how to practice, what examples you should be looking to include, and what they're actually looking for in the sort of degree apprentice. Because when you listen to the story, you realize, he actually didn't do IT digital subjects at A-level. His subjects were completely non-technical, yet he ended up in a software development degree apprenticeship. So there is something there to actually listen and think about, because you don't necessarily need to be doing something technical right now to be eligible for such opportunities. There's a certain thing or certain qualities they look for in apprentices, and they don't necessarily expect you to have the experience already. If you do, or if you have some technical expertise or some sort of technical knowledge, then that's great, but it's not necessarily a requirement. So that might automatically put off some people before they even think about applying. So I talk a lot about that, and as well as as usual in every episode, tons of advice on how to be prepared for certain application stages, and how to, I guess, be prepared to apply for apprenticeships. So definitely, this will be a useful one. He's a solid brother, very interesting, good character, and you can tell there's a lot of wisdom on his young shoulders so far. Alhamdulillah. Enjoy, and do like, subscribe, and comment, and share some positive feedback. Brother Umayr, welcome to the Believers Early Careers podcast. How are you, bro?
Jazakallah khair. Thanks for having me. Alhamdulillah, I'm very good. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, it's good, man. I've come back from Istanbul, so I'm still in a bit of a holiday mood, but I'm glad we got something arranged, because I think today we're going to be discussing an interesting apprenticeship scheme, because people are very interested in tech, people are very interested in software engineering, and there's always that kind of debate or discussion about, do I pursue this through university, or do I pursue this through an apprenticeship? And here we are, we have you, alhamdulillah, a good brother like yourself, who's doing the best of both worlds, which is a degree apprenticeship, which I think not many young Muslims know about. So inshallah, today we are going to be covering about your software engineering degree apprenticeship, which I believe is at BT.
That's correct, yeah, BT.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. It's going to be, I think, a very interesting insight to get, because the way it's going with apprenticeships and government pushing the agenda, I've seen it from working in government. I think degree and apprenticeship is going to combine. And there was also a study, I think, recently that showed that the degree apprenticeships, people that are getting onto it, aren't necessarily coming from disadvantaged or diverse backgrounds. It's mainly been kind of given to those that are already in the privileged backgrounds, the kind of white middle class backgrounds as it is. So I was thinking, if you've got this amazing thing with apprenticeships and you've got budget for it because you've got that apprenticeship levy, and then you can combine it with a degree, then that can literally avoid the whole debt thing. That can literally, give you that both experience and degree level at the end of it. So people need to know about this. And,
Yeah.
inshallah, we're going to get some real insight into it and we get some real advice from it, from Brother Umayr. And inshallah, it's going to be really beneficial. And, we are very passionate about giving this advice, giving these insights to young Muslims that are listening to this so they can benefit and really pick up and build from it as well. Because there's probably a lot of things in here that you might hear about that you can go on to research more of. Or you can reach out to Umayr or myself and ask those questions about what you want to find out more about. So alhamdulillah, this should be really beneficial, inshallah. But to begin with, and this might be a shorter one than normal, but I normally ask for a career story in good detail from college to where you are now. But it'd be good to hear, from college, what were you studying and what led you to this degree apprenticeship and how was that journey?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I'm obviously not a CEO, like you've had in your previous episodes, so my career
soon,
journey will be
inshallah.
much shorter, inshallah. But essentially, I believe my journey started actually when I was 7 years old, believe it or not. This is when my parents actually took the very bold and brave decision to take the whole family to Egypt for 2 years to live there. And solely for the purpose of learning Arabic and Quran, alhamdulillah, which was one of the best decisions I say they've made for us. And I'm very, very thankful for them. And the reason why I mentioned my journey started from here is because that's really when kind of my mind opened up to serious education and to kind of academia, if you may say. And in those 2 years, I learned a lot. Alhamdulillah, I learned to master the Arabic language, grammatical, and in terms of conversational as well. And also, learning the Quran as well. Alhamdulillah, I managed to secure quite a few ajza in those 2 years. And those years were when I was very, very young, 7, 8 years old. And obviously, when I came back, I missed out 2 years of primary. So I was a little bit behind in that sense. And then obviously going into secondary, I was also behind. And in fact, the Islamic school that I attended, they gave me the place based on the fact that I had learnt Arabic and Quran, not the fact that, based on my stats or academia, because I was behind in that sense. So it was almost like I was really behind when I hit year 7. So I'm already at a disadvantage in comparison to my classmates at that stage. But then, my dad pushed for me to do a GCSE in Arabic in year 7. Now, who does a GCSE in year 7? It was unheard of
Wow.
almost. Um, so this was something, obviously, I had no clue what GCSE was in year 7, but my dad was there. He knew what he was doing. And he pushed me to do this GCSE. And alhamdulillah, I done really well in that, GCSE. And it really gave me an exposure to what a proper exam is like, and, what you will experience in year 11, doing all your GCSEs in maths, etc. So following that, he didn't stop there. My dad, he was really, really ambitious in that sense. He got me to do an A level in Arabic. So I had completed an A level in Arabic in year 9. That was, and that's really when I started to kind of think about what I want to do in the future, and what I want to achieve, because that really gave me a lot of confidence. Doing an A level at year 9, doing a GCSE in year 7. These are small things, maybe in a small subject like Arabic. It's not maths or science or biology or whatever, but it is something, and that gave me really a lot of confidence that I can do something. And then come year 11, alhamdulillah, I done excellent in my
Oh.
GCSEs. And I made it into a top 6 form, which is nearby to where I live in East London. It's called the NCS, or the Newham Collegiate Sixth Form. I'm sure quite a few people have heard of it,
Yeah, I've been past it quite a
alongside
lot of times.
Brampton. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So this 6th form is a very, very top 6th form, sending a lot of students to Oxford and Cambridge, top Russell Group universities. And not only that, they go beyond and above in that sense. And, they're sending a lot of students to American universities
Yeah.
like MIT, Harvard, etc. So this is a college we're talking about that is very, very top, and it's on the game, really, sending a lot of students to top universities and top courses. And that's the kind of standard that they've put in place, and that's the kind of expectation you have as a student, that you need to make it to these universities, you need to make it to, study medicine, chemical engineering, etc. And that was put on me as well, psychologically. I thought to myself, you know what, if these students are making it to all these universities, these top universities, why can't I make it? So it really did have a positive impact on me, and it did kind of raise my ambitions in that
Do you
sense.
think that surrounding where you're surrounded by that level of, let's say competition, but that level of
Mm.
excellence kind of
Yes,
brings you up to that, basically?
it brings you up totally.
Yeah.
It either makes you or breaks you. And in the first year, it kind of broke me simply because I was kind of overpressured, I was overburdened, and I kind of lost motivation myself. So in my first year, in year 12, I didn't do very well. I was almost dead and buried. You know, the sixth form has a policy that if you don't do well in your AS, which is your first year of A levels, you know, it's a goodbye. You're not going to make it into the next year. So I was basically dead and buried. But then the principal, and I'm really thankful for him, excellent man, and an excellent professional. He offered me an opportunity, a kind of loophole, as to say, you know, to do politics in 1 year. So that I can complete my A level journey, because obviously I had to drop the subjects that I did fail. In terms of the subjects I chose, that I mean, we can go on for that because I was very confused. I had absolute no idea what I wanted
What
to
did
do.
you choose?
So initially, I chose maths, physics, economics, and English literature. So those were my four combinations. Now, English literature, I was not interested in at A level. You know, I thought I was good at it at GCSEs, but the difference between GCSEs and A levels is massive. And you know, you're expected to read 50 odd novels for A level, and I've never read a book in my life properly like that.
I
So
can vouch for
I
that.
thought this is not for me. Yeah, this is not for me. So I decided to drop that and replace it with chemistry. Now I dropped it 1 year, or not 1 year, sorry, 1 month in, and I was already behind. So I was confused in class again. So I thought, you know what, chemistry is not for me. So I dropped that as well. Now I carried on year 12 doing maths, physics, and economics. Maths and physics are arguably the hardest A levels to do,
Hmm.
especially physics. And I really, really found it difficult. I was lazy as well. I was a bit complacent. I had lost a lot of motivation. Um, and you know, when that happens in A levels, you're only bound to
I
fail.
can, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's what happened, and I was dead and buried. There was two subjects I couldn't carry on with, so I had to drop those two subjects and really take on the offer that my principal had offered me, which was to do fast track politics, as they call it, and do it in 1 year so that I can complete my sixth form journey. And I wasn't looking to do an extra year, to be honest with you, because you know it wasn't something that appealed to me. So I took that on, and alhamdulillah, in the end, it worked out for me. I managed to get three A levels,
What
and
changed, like, in terms of, because it's the first year, you're a bit complacent. What did you change in that final year?
attitude. I changed my attitude. I mean, when I completed my GCSEs and got all these amazing grades, I thought to myself, I made it. You know, I've conquered the world. And so that attitude is what brought me down in the first place. And then the failure of year 12 is what kind of humbled me and, you know, told me that, you know, you really need to take things seriously. You know, not everything is easy in life, and you can't get complacent at all. And so that fueled my motivation. You know, the feeling I had on that results day when I saw those grades on the sheet, you know, I promised myself this to myself. I said, you know, I'm never gonna let myself feel like that ever again. So the start of that was to succeed in second year, and alhamdulillah, I managed to do that, and I was really really happy. And essentially, it was just a change of attitude, really.
There's some,
And
yeah,
mentality does bring down a lot of people.
yeah. And
So,
there's one thing there, that taste of, I think, failure, or
mm,
that kind of loss, like the L in that
yeah,
college time that you took. It kind
hmm,
of, I think, because people sometimes, I think, in our cultures and, you know, our communities, we
mm,
usually define people by their mistakes. Someone makes a mistake, we just label them by that for the
exactly,
rest of
yeah,
eternity, and, you know, for the rest of life,
mm,
because that's what all we remember. But I think the interesting thing about that is you had that setback, and when you tasted that setback and that kind of shock, because you had that complacency, and I think a lot of people, even myself, I had that complacency as well. So when
mm,
you see that, you're thinking, oh, Subhanallah, what is this? How can I,
yeah,
you know, I'm in this place, all these people are doing amazing, all these high standards, I'm surrounded by all this excellence, but then this isn't what, you know, I'm meant to be achieving. And I think that
mm,
is a driver in itself. And I think, you know, young people, you know, are, you know, like to make mistakes. And I think that's not a bad thing if you take it the right way. So the fact that you
Yeah.
used that setback as fuel and hunger to drive yourself up and complete that
Mm.
second year is a positive. Yeah, you changed that setback in like that negative to a positive. And I think a lot of people
Mm.
need to realize that, you know, if you do make a mistake, especially at the younger age, it's not
Mm.
something that's going to define you. Rather, it should be something that drives you, and you use that as that jet fuel to, I think, push yourself to you know, achieve what you need to achieve. And I think that was quite an interesting thing that motivated you and drove you. The other thing I wanted to ask was
Mm.
it's kind of separate, but something I've always been curious about, because I know you went to Egypt when you were at a very young age,
Yeah. Mm.
and it seems like you learned Arabic within a few years. And
Mm.
this is a just completely like random general question, because I realized
Yeah.
even when I did a bit of Arabic here, it's like there's a lot of focus on just like learning the grammar and a bit of vocab. But what
Mm.
difference did it make being in a country or place where they only speak Arabic? Do you think that made a big difference in terms of how quickly you picked up everything? Because I think when you're just doing a lesson once a week and you're doing, okay, this is your homework, this is your grammar, you know, learn this huruf, all that kind of stuff. You know, I'm just thinking of terms I
Mm.
can
Mm.
remember. I think,
Yeah.
I don't know, for me, that I don't naturally, or people, I don't think people naturally learn that. I know people that have been doing it for years and they still
Yeah.
can't really string a conversation, if you, like, you know,
Mm.
like that. But do you think being in that full environment made a difference in terms of your Arabic learning, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, massive difference. I mean, you're in an environment, you're in a school that's full of Arabic speaking people that do not know a single word of English, that do not have access to Google Translate. So you're either going to understand them or attempt to try and understand them, or you're not going to know what's going on. And so that environment automatically really pushes you to the level where you will understand eventually. Whether that's through, for example, in Arabic, you know, they will point to a glass if they're referring to a glass. You know, they will use hand gestures, or they will use various other techniques like vocabulary. You know, they'd group it in certain groups. Like, for example, foods and drink. You know, today we're going through foods and drink. And so you automatically kind of pick it up like that. Whereas in the UK, if you're studying, for example, in an institute that's an English speaking Arabic teacher, you don't really have that. Why? It's almost like a luxury. And when you have luxury, you know, you tend to learn a lot slower.
Yeah.
Whereas in Egypt, you don't have that luxury. You're just going to pick it up. And it's natural. And especially at a young age, 7, 8 years old, you pick it up like a sponge, really. And within a matter of weeks and months, you know, you have some sort of vocabulary in you and you're picking up a lot. So I think that's the best way to learn a language
Get out
is
there.
to go out to the country that speaks that language, not speaks your language, that speaks that language that you're learning, and you stay with them. You pick it up. For example, going to the shop with my father. I used to go to the shops with my father, and he didn't know Arabic either. He was studying as well at the time, and you know, trying to explain, I want to buy some matches. How would you explain that if you've never spoken the language in your life? So you pick up these small little words, and you know, you kind of resemble them. For example, now I know what matches mean because I remember it from that incident where we went to the shop or the pharmacy and we were looking for matches. And you know, we were doing hand gestures like this, and the guy was thinking that we wanted toothbrushes, but we actually wanted matches. So
Yeah.
that event just has been stuck with me for 10 years. And that's how I associate matches too. So these resemblances is what makes you pick up the language and the vocab. And then eventually down the line, you have enough vocab within your kind of bank in your head to be able to formulate sentences. And then that's where you kind of delve into the grammar and you automatically understand.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that is the fact that you're put. So I think one of the things is stepping out of the comfort zone and going into a place where English
Mm,
isn't being spoken because you're forced to speak Arabic and pick it
yeah.
up. The other thing I realized we mentioned about the matches is that situation created that question and created that curiosity in your head to learn
Mm,
what does that word mean? What is it? How do you
yeah.
say it matches in Arabic? 'Cause I think one thing, you know, I realized about learning, and I can really relate to it because in education I never had much interest. I think if I was interested in what I was studying and had curiosity, I think I would have really
Mm,
learned much more, because I read somewhere that, you know, the brain doesn't absorb knowledge, the brain creates knowledge and information. And how do you do that?
yeah.
You have questions, you have curiosity. So when you're a kid,
Mm,
you ask, what's this, what's that, what's this, what's that? You ask your parents everything. And the fact that when they
yeah.
answer it, it kind of stays in your head because you created that question which has created that information and it sticks in your head. Whereas
Exactly. Yeah.
when you're going in and just cramming those vocabs, for example, in your head and trying to pick up, saying qalamun, kitabun, and just like
Kitabun, yeah.
then that's one way to learn it. But if you're generally in a situation where you need to know it and you're curious to know what it is because you need it to get on, then you're gonna pick it up that bam a lot quicker because you're creating that knowledge. And I think that's a really interesting way of learning is by being in a situation where you have to learn it and where the question has come up in your head. What does this mean? How do I relate this? And yeah, when you're creating that question, you're creating the knowledge and it sinks in way better than just absorbing it in your head.
Exactly. And in an environment like that, it's more of a mode of survival rather than a chore.
Yeah.
Because when you're sitting back home here, Arabic or Spanish or whatever language you're studying on Duolingo, for example, it's almost like a chore. One day you may be motivated, the next day you're just doing it for the sake of it. You're not really into it some days. Whereas if you're in that environment, it's a case of survival. And especially as an adult, if you go out there, if you want to buy food, if you're in a hospital, if you have an emergency, this is a case of survival, and you need the language. You need to know the language.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it becomes a part of your life, Arabic, and that's the best way to pick it up, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think it's worked best for me as well.
Yeah. So creating that knowledge and the necessity as well is another thing that drives it. And one thing I noticed is, it seems like your father, mashallah, he really pushed you to do things which at the time you may not have perceived to be the best thing, or you may not know what was going on, but it seems like he had that foresight and that vision to say, okay, I'm going to put you here, take you to Egypt, learn Arabic, and the way he kind of brought you back as well to do your studies and all of that. I think that must have played quite a significant part in your development, hasn't it?
Massive part. Both of my parents, my father and mother, massive part. May Allah reward them and grant them a happy life. Massive part. My father and my mother come from a background where they're not educated at all. My father, he dropped out of school early to help his father work. He done 3 GCSEs, and all 3 GCSEs he didn't pass. Because he wasn't focused on his education. He was more focused in helping his father at the time. My mother comes from Pakistan. Alhamdulillah, she's done amazing things for us, all my siblings and myself, and she's done absolutely amazing things. And these things, I think, is a motivation for them as well. The fact that they didn't have an educated background, they had to struggle. They had to work hard to get us where we are now as a family. They didn't want us to go through the same struggle.
Yeah.
Do you understand? And that was their motivation to push their children, to push myself and my siblings as well, to do the best, not just in the dunya, for example, in apprenticeships, whatever, but also in terms of the deen as well, in terms of Arabic. And that's the reason why they took us to Egypt so early. I was 7, my brother was 5, my younger sister was 2, and we were all learning Arabic at that time. So they had this vision of doing the best in both worlds. And alhamdulillah, it's the best thing they've done for us, pushing us to do these things. Even when my father pushed me to do A-levels in Arabic, I was thinking, what's the point? I haven't even done my GCSEs yet. And I was a bit skeptical in that sense. But he pushed me. And now I realize the benefits of what they've done. Every single thing that they've done has benefited me, whether it's direct or indirectly.
Yeah.
So they've played a massive part. A massive part, and a huge credit goes to them.
MashaAllah, may Allah reward them. And I love how they instilled it in the sense that it wasn't just the dunya in mind, which I think a lot of parents can kind of fall into that trap, and sometimes understandably so, because the only thing they know is education in terms of social mobility and getting out and improving the lives of their children. But the fact that they had it in their mind that it's not just dunya but the akhirah, and kind of connecting both as well. Because you did Arabic in Egypt, but then he brought you back and made you do it in GCSE and A-level, so it kind of relates to how the current education system is as well, and that's amazing. But it leads me to the question, because I know maybe a lot of our parents don't, like my parents haven't really had that doing the proper corporate jobs or all that kind of stuff and had that insight into that. So but they understand that education is important. But from your perspective, how was it transitioning from education to employment?
So that transition was made easy for me because it was encouraged by my parents. You know, a lot of parents, especially from the Asian background, really push their children towards medicine, engineering, university kind of thing, right? And I'm sure you have experience with that. My parents weren't like that. In fact, my parents didn't want me to go university. Um, they pushed for an apprenticeship from day one, really, because of the benefits. And you know, I was encouraged to go into an apprenticeship by my parents. In fact, it was the opposite. In school, I was being told, you know, you got to go uni and that kind of thing. Whereas at home, I was being told, you know, you can do an apprenticeship. So the roles were kind of reversed in that sense. And I was so set on the idea of an apprenticeship so much that I didn't even bother applying for university in the end. I didn't bother applying for UCAS. You know, I had no money in my bank, so I thought, why should I spend £30 on an application where I know that I'm not going to be going university? So it was very encouraged from the get-go. And the transition in terms of the actual kind of dynamics of education and then transitioning into employment was much different. You know, now it's much more independent. You know, you're responsible for everything. You know, no one's going to tell you what to do. No one's going to tell you to work hard. No one's going to tell you to meet deadlines. You know, no one's going to, there's absolutely nothing. You know, you make your future. The future is in your hands. How you do in an apprenticeship, how you do in this job, how you do your university modules is all in your hand. In the end, there will be consequences. You face the sack or you get a promotion, but that's all in your hand. There's not going to be someone on top of you telling you what to do. And I think that independence it really did kind of sink into me because you know it kind of taught me that if you be complacent, it's all gonna there's gonna be no one to save you.
Mm.
It's all down to you. So that's really what motivates me essentially is that you know this is all in my hands. You know you can always complain about this and that about a workplace, but in the end it's all in your hand. You know how you do in terms of your job, how you do in terms of your university, etc. It's all in your hand. And I always see that, you know, and unfortunately this is the case, that there's a lot of bias in the workplace. But I've always had this mentality that, you know, I want to be so good in my job and I want to be so good in my field that no matter how much the interviewer hates me or hates my color or hates my religion or hates my beard, he has no choice but to accept me because they need me for the skills that I have and for the fact that I'm so good.
And the fact
That's the
is,
mentality. Yeah,
you've got the power as well. And
exactly.
you just shown it there because
Mm,
fundamentally, I think people forget is despite everything that's going around, all the noise, you're in control of how you act, you're in control of how you
mm,
react. And
mm,
that it's empowering as well because I think we can easily get lost in social media,
mm,
what people say and
mm,
all that, and think, oh, no, are we doing the right thing? But we need to kind of hone that out and think, you know what, I'm responsible for my actions.
mm.
And whatever's going on, you know, if it's in work, around the world, how I react is down to me. Now, do I want to be the best or do I want to just let be dictated by everything else that's going on? And I think as
Exactly. Yeah.
Muslims, young Muslims, we have that something have that challenge with the identity crisis or stuff like that. I think we need to remember that, you know, we've got the guidance with the Sunnah,
Mm,
we've got the Quran, we've got, you know, we've got the knowledge, the advice, the history, everything is there.
yeah.
It's your choice. What do you want to do with it? You know, are you
Mm,
gonna find excuses and be like, oh man, this, that, Islamophobia, or are you gonna, you know, fair enough, the situation might not be ideal, but like you said, you know, you can still use that as a motivation to become better and better and better to the point where, you know, be so good that they can't ignore you.
exactly.
Like Muhammad
Yeah.
Arshad
Exactly.
said, he says that, be so
Mm,
good that they can't ignore you. And don't be that person that ducks and dives, be that person that, you know, really builds those skills and becomes like that person that can't be replaced. And, you know, yeah, literally that is
yeah.
that. And you kind of reminded me that I actually paid £30 for my UCAS application and I left uni after 2 weeks. So you know, thanks for that reminder. I should realize that thinking, oh my god, I should remember paying for that and then leaving after 2 weeks and not ever looking back at university.
Yeah.
That was the L which I have been reminded of. Cool.
No, no, alhamdulillah. In the end, it works out for you. So,
Yeah.
alhamdulillah. Yeah. So you mentioned that you actually touched upon identity crisis, and I think that's a massive, massive problem that we have as Muslims, especially in the workplace. You know, so many people are scared to go out for 15 minutes to pray. So many people. Whereas you have your colleagues who go out to multiple smoking breaks. but you are shy to kind of, go out to pray your salah. It only takes 10, 15 minutes. And, this is something that I understand why people feel like that. But if you show that you are shy and that you are uncomfortable with your beliefs, that resonates within other people as well in the workplace. Whereas if you show a more proactive approach and you say, you know what, look, you lay out to your manager, this is something I've done from the beginning. I told my line manager straight up, I'm a Muslim. I have certain beliefs. I need a prayer room to pray. Yeah. Uh, Certain things like shaking the opposite gender's hand. This is something as it's a form of respect. This is something I don't do. So I put it on the table straight. And it was an uncomfortable conversation for me because I didn't know how my manager would react. I don't know him as a person. I didn't know him to start with. And it was an uncomfortable, conversation. But I thought, what's the worst that can happen? He's just going to think of me as some next Muslim. That's the worst that can happen. There's nothing else that can happen,
Yeah.
especially in big corporations,
Yeah.
And it worked out for me in the end. He was very understanding, alhamdulillah, very, very understanding. In fact, on the first day, which was our induction, we were actually in the BT Sports Studios for our induction, which was amazing. I requested, he came up to me actually and he said, listen, there's no prayer room here, but we can give you a changing room. And I thought, one of those changing rooms with very small. I thought it was one of those, and I thought to myself, yeah, that's fine. That's totally fine. I can just lay out my prayer mat and pray in the corner, no problem. So prayer time came, and they took me to Gary Lineker's changing room. Obviously he works for BT Sport, and he has his own bespoke changing room. So I walk in, and it's a massive room. It's like an ensuite bedroom. You got your bed there, you got TV, you got everything. You got a massive bathroom, shower, everything. So that was a nice little touch to have as well. And, alhamdulillah, I managed to pray. But the fact is, and the reason why I mention this is that if you put things on the table, they will help you facilitate these things, especially if they're understanding. And they have to by law, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
Whatever is in their heart is irrelevant because by law, and, especially in big corporations, they have to facilitate these things. But a lot of people, a lot of Muslims don't ask for these things or they don't speak up with these things.
Because they think they might be perceived as,
Exactly. Yeah. And another thing as well, he came up to me in the end and he said, do you want me to tell your whole team before you go into office that you do not shake the opposite gender's hands? And I said that would be very much appreciated, but it's from a perspective of respect, not kind of any other perspective that they may perceive it as. And so he alhamdulillah, he made the team aware. And so when I walked into the office the first day, no one approached me for a handshake, etc. And it made my transitioning so much easier, especially as an apprentice. You feel like you're the inferior person as an apprentice. You have people over there in office that are working for 40, 50, 60 years. They've been at this company since BT was created, which was, many, many moons ago. I wasn't even born then. You have people that have been working. My manager currently, my operational manager, he's been working at BT since 1987. So these are the type of people you have. And automatically you would feel inferior. Why? Because they have so much knowledge. They have so much to offer.
Yeah.
And you're just an apprentice that just started their working life like 2 minutes ago.
Yeah.
You understand? So that made my life much, much easier from the Islamic sense. And, I was much more proud of, going out to pray, etc. So I always advise people, lay it on the table. Be upfront and honest about it.
I think you're proactive.
Yeah, be proud of your beliefs.
That's what made it different. Because I've been in both situations where I've done it proactively and it was just like seamless. I've done it reactively and there's awkward moments basically. And I think a lot of people can fear that. So I think that's an amazing advice there. If people are in that position where they're feeling anxious about that, then, as you mentioned, put it out there before and preemptively strike it rather than have to go in there and having to have all those awkward interactions. And because sometimes you could do it confidently, other times it might just be like just going to a meeting and just, not being aware of it and being caught off guard. You think, oh crap. Whereas if you literally proactively put it out there, I think that's a really amazing way to get it done in a comfortable way and not have to deal with that awkwardness after, because you've already told the person, they've communicated the information. You don't have to go around and say it, explain yourself all the time. And alhamdulillah, that's a much better way to do it. And it's quite amazing how you've put Baraka in Gary Lineker's changing room as well. He actually has no idea. But
Subhanallah.
maybe fortunes might change for him because of
Maybe.
that.
May Allah guide him.
I mean, as an interesting
Mhm.
little anecdote there. But,
Yeah, very interesting.
but
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
moving on, I guess more to the actual scheme.
Mm.
What led you to software engineering in particular?
So,
And were you like
like I
applying for
mentioned,
other schemes as well?
yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, I had no clue what I was going into. I was very confused. I didn't have anything to go by. You know, what do I go into? I had absolutely no clue. So I applied to a multitude of apprenticeship schemes. I applied to quantity surveying construction. I applied to a few finance ones. I applied to quite a few software engineering, cybersecurity, networking, etc. So there was a whole host of things that I was applying to, and in all honesty, I was applying because I wanted something there secure for me by September. I didn't want to take out a gap year at all. So, alhamdulillah, in the end, I managed to get 4 offers. One from the civil service, Ministry of Housing, as an apprentice economist. So this was a degree
Oh,
apprenticeship.
right. So,
Yeah, so I really enjoyed economics as an A-level subject. And I still do. I like keeping up with a lot of news, and economics was something I was interested in, and I would have enjoyed that 100%. So I was really happy that I got that, and the benefits of it was excellent as well as you do have with the civil service. So I had that job. I also had an offer from TFL in quantity surveying. And this was something I was very, very set on the moment I came across the scheme around December time. So in my head, I was thinking, it's TFL, it's quantity surveying. I'm going into that. Um, but then something changed. And obviously, I had the BT offer as well. But then something changed. I was about to sign the contracts for TFL. The manager was calling me. He was saying, when are you signing the contract? He wanted me to sign the contracts and stuff. Um, and I was about to print the contracts and sign them off and send them off, and I was a bit double-minded. I started getting doubts. So I decided to call him back and say, listen, give me another week at least so that I can think about it. And I was really looking into the BT apprenticeship. And I was thinking, you know what? Software engineering, technology, it's only 4 years. The TFL one was 6.5 years. Although the TFL one was 22, the starting salary was a bit higher in terms of £2,000. And at that time, someone who's got £2.50 in their account, £2,000 seems like, wow, I don't want to miss out on that £2,000.
massive, yeah.
You
Yeah.
understand? Um, so I started getting double-minded in that sense, and I started researching into BT. I quite like BT in terms of their values and the way they are, flexible working, not very rigid in terms of their corporate environment. For example, if you were to go to the Big Four, it's very, very corporate, very rigid, and that's something I didn't want to go into
Mm.
anyways. BT is a lot more chilled out in that sense, in terms of dress code, in terms of that kind of thing. And it did match what I wanted in terms of where I want to work. So I started getting more and more closer to BT. I've always had a thing for technology. When I was in secondary school, I decided to download a trial, 30-day free trial for Photoshop and After Effects, Adobe After Effects. And I started playing around and I got really good at it. I started building a little portfolio for myself in terms of graphic design. This is something back in the day, which I've stopped doing a long time ago. But technology was something I loved playing around with. And I thought to myself, software engineering is very interesting. I've always loved, some coding. No one loves coding, but I've always enjoyed coding. And I thought to myself, you know what? This is a scheme that I need to go into. Although I'm going to take a 2 grand pay cut, even though I've never had a job in my life. The future is there. The technology industry is booming. If you look at the COVID situation, the technology industry has almost been untouched. In fact, it's
Yeah.
gained a lot more, with tools like Skype, Zoom,
It's
etc.
kickstarted the whole digital transformation pretty
Exactly.
much.
Massive. It's in fact it's fast. It's made it much more faster.
Yeah.
The transition to working from home. That's something that's become very popular now. Before it was very, very kind of unpopular, something that people were really unsure about. But now It's kick-started that. And so the technology industry is here, whether you like it or not. It's booming. And I thought this is the industry I want to be in. And I've spoken to quite a few industry specialists as well. And I thought to myself, yeah, this is the industry that's really going to take you to levels that you wouldn't think of. And there's a lot of potential in technology, especially in artificial intelligence, machine learning, that kind of thing. And that's something I want to go into eventually. Um, so I decided to choose BT. I sent off the email to TFO, and that's it. BT it was. So that's what led me into BT, really. In terms of the degree apprenticeship, I've always been doing my research into apprenticeships. And when I saw degree apprenticeship, I thought to myself, you're getting what you're going to get at university. But on top of that, you're not paying for it, the degree. You're getting paid and you're getting 4 years of experience. So the plus sides were so great in comparison to the university degree, the conventional degree route that you take. And I thought to myself, it's a win-win situation. It really is.
100%.
And there is no catch to it, to be honest. I thought to myself, you know what, there might be a slight catch. When I join, I might see a catch or something. There hasn't been a catch. And I think the reason why people don't really apply for degree apprenticeships is because it's seen as the inferior kind of option, if you may say. It's a bit like with A levels and BTech. With BTech, I know quite a few people who've made it to university through BTechs. So BTechs aren't as bad, even though it's a meme. Every inferior thing you refer to it as the BTech kind of thing, right? So degree apprenticeships is almost the same. People think, what, it's for people who haven't done really well in their A levels, etc., etc. And this is a big misconception I get, actually, is that why are the grade requirements so low for degree apprenticeships? Like, for example, my scheme, I think the grade requirements were BBC or something like that. The reason why they're so low is because they want more people applying. Yeah, right now you have thousands and thousands of people applying for university degrees. Basically the whole country applying for degrees, and you have a small segment of those people applying for degree apprenticeships. So it's a simple case of wanting to attract more people to it. And like you mentioned earlier in your introduction as well, the government's doing a lot more work in raising awareness in terms of advertisements, in terms of initiatives, the apprenticeship levy, these things. A lot of employers are doing apprenticeships because they have the incentive to do it, right? Because of the apprenticeship levy. Now the work needs to kind of shift towards incentivizing students into applying for degree apprenticeships. And the incentive's always been there, to be honest. 20,000 starting, no debt,
Full degree.
Full degree, 4 years experience. And you do not have to apply for those graduate roles that every person in this country is seeking.
Yeah.
Every graduate in this country is seeking, right? So the benefits were massive, and I thought, you know what, this is what I want to go into.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because from maybe it was around your environment where they may have seen it as inferior to doing that the full degree. From my very narrow perspective, I was thinking maybe the degree apprenticeship, like, it's a lot harder to get into because it sounds so good. Like everything you just mentioned, degree.
It is actually quite hard. It's very difficult to get into, to be honest. If I put out numbers, so for the TFO apprenticeship that I applied for, very, very competitive. I think more competitive than the one I'm on now. I think 5,000 people applied for this scheme, the one that I applied for. 10 people ended up at the assessment center. And me and one other person or two other people got the scheme. So that's 3 people out of 5,000. So if you do the maths, my maths is terrible, but if you do the maths, what kind of percentage are we looking at? A very, very small percentage.
0.00 something.
Yeah, it's very, very competitive in that sense. Yeah. With BT, again, only 4 of us made it into this scheme out of hundreds and thousands. So don't get me wrong, it is competitive. It's hard, very hard. I was very fortunate. Alhamdulillah, I'd done something right to be getting all these offers left, right, and center. I didn't really get a rejection. I don't think I got a rejection. But a lot of people I know, a lot of friends, they've been getting rejections, a lot of rejections. And the simple case is that it is competitive. It's maybe equally as competitive as university, but not a lot of people are applying. It's concentrated, but still a lot of people are applying. Like, for example, I don't know, for UCL medicine, how many people
Mm.
apply? Well, I mean, you can't really compare medicine to an apprenticeship because that's another league. But for example, computer science at UCL, how many people apply? Way more than people who would apply for an apprenticeship at a given company. So from that sense, there's less people applying. But because it's so saturated and because there are very minimal roles in a company, in university you have X amount of roles or X amount of places, but in a company they can't give the same amount of roles because this is, work. This isn't university. So from that sense, the competitiveness is I think equal,
Mm.
if not harder
Yeah.
sometimes. Um,
But just to state there as well, I wouldn't want it to be a detractor for anyone, because I think there's a
mm,
few things that, from a government perspective, from what I've seen, is that
mm,
there are a lot more degree apprenticeship standards being developed. So there will be
yeah.
more coming out. And,
Mm,
alongside that, hopefully there'll be more opportunities. But I think, I guess it's saying in the mind that it's not going to be an easy ride, just because, it might
mm,
not be as highly regarded as doing a degree at Oxford or something like that. It doesn't necessarily
yeah.
mean it's a lot easier to get into. So I think one of the things we'll get at some point is how to be best prepared, and how to make sure that, you're doing the right things and getting the right
Definitely. Yeah.
practices to put
Mm,
yourself in a strong position. Because
mm,
and like with all good things, nothing comes easy, and I think we need to embed that in our mind, that
mm,
just because
yeah.
it's getting less applicants, it'll be easier.
Mm,
That's not the case. It is, as you mentioned,
mm,
equally, or if not more challenging. But that
yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean you can't get in there. Like, for example,
Mm,
with the fast stream application window, I think there's a lot more opportunities, but there was like 55,000 applicants. But the way to do it,
wow.
for example, is like each round it maybe halves. So after that, the first round it might go down to like maybe 25 or 30k. Then after the next
Mm,
application, it goes back by half. So the ratio is like you got to beat this. That maybe you got to beat the next person basically, and maybe like the more it
yeah.
gets to, maybe means you beat like up to 10 people or more than that. But again, that shouldn't necessarily be a detractor. And one thing I realized is when I was applying is that when I focused more on myself, I did better.
Mm,
Whereas when I was more focused on others and thinking about others who are applying,
yeah.
then straight away I
Hmm.
invited more pressure to myself, thinking, oh, how am I going to be better than that person? That guy
Exactly.
comes in a
Yeah.
suit looking all smart. This guy looks like
Mm,
he plays a part. But if you focus on that, then you're not going to focus on your own performance and yourself. So,
mm,
yeah, we'll
exactly.
get into that a bit more. But I think really honing in on, because it's difficult, it doesn't mean it's impossible. It can be done with the right preparation and focusing on yourself, basically. But
Exactly.
getting on to the insight part. So what's actually like on, you know, on the program? Like, what's actually like working in BT and the tech environment? How does the scheme work?
Right. So BT work. Okay. So let's start off with the scheme itself. So the scheme I'm on is a software engineering degree apprenticeship, um, which is at a length of 4 years. I've done 1 year, so I have 3 years left. Um, so it's a level 6 one, which is basically you get a bachelor's degree in digital and technology solutions. For those that don't know what DTS is, now a lot of people have asked me, what's the difference between digital and technology solutions and computer science? Now, the difference I'd say is computer science is a lot more theoretical. I know a lot of people that are doing computer science in my year, and I kind of ask them and talk to them about their modules, and it's a lot more theoretical, a lot more theoretical. Whereas with digital and technology solutions, it's designed for employers, for companies. Companies are not giving out apprenticeships for the sake of it. Companies see some business value in hiring apprentices. They see that this person is going to bring about this much value to the business. Yeah. So the digital and technology solutions degree essentially has modules that are much more related to the industry itself, much more applicable. For example, we do cybersecurity modules. We do information systems business. So it's a whole host of things. Software engineering is something I will specialize in eventually. But right now, I'm studying networks. I'm studying information systems. I'm studying business. I'm studying cybersecurity. So you're given exposure to a whole host of things within the technology industry. Firstly, to understand what each thing is, because you need to know a bit of each when working. You can't be oblivious to cybersecurity. Otherwise, you're going to cause a whole big problem for your
Yeah.
company. Also, like I mentioned, you specialize in software engineering. So over the 4 years, I will specialize. But right now we are doing a whole host of things. So like I mentioned, the difference is simply it's more applicable into industry. More applicable. That's all it is. It isn't an inferior version of computer science. That's why it's not called computer science, because essentially it's looking at solutions, technological solutions, developing technological solutions that makes the business more efficient, that brings back business value. It's simple
Yeah.
as. And I think that's much better than computer science. Why? Because a lot of things that people learn in computer science degrees, they don't even apply really. It's all theoretical, majority of it. And that's the only difference. That's the degree that we do at university. In terms of how the structure is, you work like a normal employee. You work 9 to 5. A lot more flexible, with, especially with BT. If you want to start at 10, you have a dentist appointment, you can do so. All you have to do is let your manager know.
Yeah.
There isn't no kind of register in the morning. If you're not banging at 8:30, that's it. You're on disciplinary. No, it doesn't work like that. A lot of people think that, and I don't blame them because, that has been the case in the past with some
Mm.
companies. But it's not like that at all. It's not like that. You have the freedom to come in at 8:30, 8 o'clock, 9,
Flexi
9:30.
time, really massive benefit.
Flexi time, yeah,
Massive.
exactly, massive benefit. And even before COVID, BT was very flexible. Fridays, it's called, you're not to come into office. No one comes into office on Fridays. If you go to BT Center, which is where I work in, BT headquarters, it's 8 floors, and if you go in on Friday, it's a ghost town. It's like no one's there. It's deserted. Even the top senior managers, they work from home. So it's a culture in BT that you work from home on a Friday. And within your team as well, if you want to work from home certain days, you can do
Yeah.
so as well. So very, very flexible in that sense. And I've enjoyed that flexibility a lot pre-COVID. With COVID coming in, it's absolutely, working from home whenever you want, that kind of thing. So you've basically been given much more
Yeah.
flexibility in that sense. And have I taken advantage of it? Yes, I have. For example, if my family needs to go out to shopping, you can do that. Um, so those kind of things really do matter, especially when you have a family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if you're looking to have a family as well. These things matter. And BT is very flexible. It's always been flexible in that sense. They're very proud of their flexible working arrangements. Um, so in that sense as well, also in terms of the apprenticeship scheme, they give you 1 day off a week, which is called a study day, which is on top of your university days. Each week you have 20% off, which is 1 day for studying. And in that day, you can do your assignments, you can do your work, you can do your uni work, you can do
Yeah.
whatever.
And I think that's where
Yeah.
the 20% off the job learning time and so
Mm.
the way apprenticeships work, for example, with the degree, is 100%, just learning and it's full theory.
Yeah.
Apprenticeships 80%
Mm.
working, 20% learning.
Yep.
So the
Mm.
20% you're learning, you're going to apply onto the 80%, which is like the kind of
Exactly.
whole
Yeah.
thinking behind that. And that's what you mentioned about the whole the digital technical solutions thing, degree
Yep.
apprenticeship, I'm saying thing. With that, it's more focused, yeah, like I said, on the practical stuff that happens at work.
Mm.
And that's because your apprenticeship has to be related to what you do in the job. So the fact that things that you learn, you
Exactly.
should be able to relate it to the office, to what you do, and stuff like that. So it
Mm.
naturally has that relationship, and it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more practical, which I think you don't necessarily get when people go to university. It's very different,
No, you don't.
very
Yeah.
different.
Very different. Yeah.
So what does a typical day look like working in BT, or a typical week?
Typical day. I mean, obviously, it depends pre-COVID or during
Both.
COVID. So obviously with pre-COVID, I used to go into office into central London. Would commute on that disgusting central line. Not looking forward to
Yeah,
it. But yeah, so essentially, I'd wake up around 7:30, 7:45, 8 o'clock maximum. You know, go into office, be there for 9ish, 9:15, 9:30, pushing it. And obviously, get started, log on. In the mornings, it really depends how your mornings are. Some mornings are busy because you have meetings. Some mornings aren't busy. So if the mornings are busy with meetings, then obviously I'd attend the meetings, whether it's online or in person. But if it's not busy, then during the gaps I have, I try to fit in some personal development because it's very, very important with apprenticeships. You're not being asked to work to your maximum level. You have a lot of free time and a lot of gaps in between your meetings and your role. So it's very important that you take advantage of these gaps. Personal development, what I mean by that is learning a programming language, doing a course on Pluralsight or, Code Academy or, one of these sites. Very, very important to do this because personal development is what makes you stand out from the other apprentices. You know, you can do the bare minimum, which is your apprenticeship scheme and your degree, and that's it. But if you do more than that, you would really stand out, and it matters in terms of pay rises and the role you get at the end as well. So that's what I try to do. And then obviously lunchtime you can choose whenever, but I try to choose it whenever there's salah, dhuhr salah, around 12:30, 1 o'clock. And obviously pray, have lunch, etc. And then obviously after that there's quite a few meetings in the afternoon. So I'd have those meetings, yeah. And then obviously I'd have some free time at the end of the day again, and I'd do some personal development and then log off and go
Do
home.
they
So
get you to do the coding stuff? Like, do you like have to use a terminal and write down these languages and stuff like
yeah,
that? How does that look?
so so it depends on the role really. So we have rotations, right? Various rotations, 9 month rotations. So the first rotation was in IT transformation, massive part of BT right now, transformation, because we want to transform a lot of
Yeah,
things. So IT transformation isn't really a kind of software engineering kind of role. There wasn't much software engineering involved. It was more change management, you know, dealing with stakeholders, dealing with new kind of services, etc. So I think there wasn't much coding in that role. But now that I've moved into a different rotation in my apprenticeship, which is in IT OpenReach, there's a lot more working on robots, working on our OpenReach systems. So, for example, you know, in the exchanges that we have and you know, the broadband lines that come to your house, you know, there's something called fault management. You know, you don't have a person traveling along miles and miles of lines looking for faults. You know, it's a computer that shows you where the fault is. So these robots and computers and systems can sometimes break down, and our team is the team that supports these robots and systems and fixes them, etc. So there's a lot of coding in that. The language that we use is a pretty old but useful language, which is VB.NET, VBA, etc. So we've been doing quite a few coding in that on our systems. Um, so typically it's not a case of, you know, like you find it in movies, you know, you're typing really fast and, you know, you're coding up
Mr.
program. No,
Robot.
yeah, it doesn't work like that. You know, if there's a fault, you find the fault in the system, you look at what the problem is, and you patch it up with some sort of, you know, kind of patch, some sort of system that you'd be using.
Yeah, I find it amazing how that
Mm,
that forget like the actual learning the language of the code, but I just find it amazing how you can write up a few lines and it like, makes the computer do a whole function. Like for example, you're talking about
yeah.
the BT lines, the broadband, all that, and the fault finding. Like, the fact that
Mm,
you should type a few things, hit enter, and it just does something which just sets the command.
yeah.
And
Mm,
I do wonder who like invented like the actual language of the code. It's just amazing how
yeah.
I
Mm.
always had that curiosity, but it's very valuable insight there to some of the stuff that you're working on. What happens like at the end of the scheme? So you mentioned the rotations, and it's a
Yeah.
4 year thing. So what happens at the end?
So at the end, you're pretty much guaranteed a job at the end,
Yeah,
considering you do
4 years
well,
of
of course.
development
You
and
know,
investment.
yeah, exactly. You know, they're not going to want to kick you out for sure. Of course, if you decide to not turn up to work every day and you decide to fail your degree, of course, you know, you can't expect to stay on. But generally speaking, no one does that anyways, once they get a scheme, because they do realize the benefits once you get in. So once you kind of finish the apprenticeship, they basically offer you a job, and they do an interview for, you know, for formal reasons, which is not really an interview.
Informal kind of thing.
It's just to formalize and standardize
Yeah.
things. So you essentially get a job. You know, no need to compete with anyone, no need to apply to hundreds of jobs and get rejections from all hundred jobs. None of that. Yeah. So you're essentially guaranteed a job, and you get a really big pay rise as well. I mean, a lot of people are, and rightfully so, a lot of people are impressed by the numbers. I tell you now, you know, you're looking at 40, 42, 45,000 pounds when you complete the apprenticeship scheme in software engineering.
Not bad.
So it's big numbers we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about. You know,
yeah,
for
yeah.
example, yeah, with graduate roles, once you finish university, of course, you have that massive debt on your head. But also, the starting salary for graduate roles, I think in BT is 25,000, or maybe it's gone up to 30,000. Maximum you're looking at is 30,000, 32,000. But we're talking about 10 grand extra at 42,000, 45,000, and you've been paid for 4 years
Yeah,
as well.
and know that.
So that's a lot of money in the
Yeah,
bank.
mashallah. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's important to know that
So,
because
Very
we
important. Yeah.
often use that as a taboo. We don't even want to mention the salary, but
Yeah.
fundamentally, salary is not the most important thing. But I think you got to know it, and you got,
Mm.
especially with social mobility, like you kind of need to know what the prospects are. So I think it's really useful information for people that are considering it to know or have an idea of
Mm.
how that could look. And it's not about
Mm.
solely on salary. I just want to earn the salary, but it's more about knowing what potential there is there, and
Yeah. Massive.
just having that information. What key skills do you think you've developed? I think over the first year or so.
A lot of skills. This 1 year that I've spent at BT has opened my mind up to so many things that I would have never come across at university at all. You know, my classmates who now go to university are so oblivious to the stuff I talk about. They have absolutely no clue what I'm talking about. And this is stuff I've picked up. You know, very basic things like stakeholder management. That's a massive skill I
Mm.
picked up, especially in my first rotation. Stakeholder management, very important. You don't learn that at university. Stuff like so many other things.
Soft skills and the
Also,
invisible kind of
yeah,
stuff.
a lot of soft skills. A lot of soft skills you learn. You know, even writing an email. Some people don't know how to write an
Mm.
email. You look at how they write an email and you think, seriously, it might sound basic, but these are skills that you learn straight away. You know, writing emails, how to, how to disagree with someone in the workplace. You know, there's ways to do that. You can't just say, you know what, you're
Yeah.
wrong. Get out of here. It doesn't work like that. Yeah. So these very small things is something you do not learn at uni. And you have a whole 4 years advantage in these things, these soft skills. Very, very important. And there's a huge emphasis on soft skills in a workplace, how you conduct yourself, how what your demeanor is. Very, very important, these things. Um, and essentially the things that I've learned as well, you know, ways of working, agile methodologies, Scrum Master. What is a Scrum Master? If you were to go to a university student and ask them what a Scrum Master is, I don't think they
That's
would
really
know what
important
that
because
is.
that's literally how people
Very
get
important.
work.
Yeah, exactly. This is, and there's a huge emphasis, especially agile ways
Yeah.
of working for software
Yeah.
developers. You know, Kanban boards, these things. This has got nothing to do with creating software, nothing to do with programming, but it's something you're expected to know. If you look at all job roles, especially in technology and software engineering, required skills, agile ways of working, Kanban board, etc. These things is something that facilitates the software side of things. And it's very important to know. And I worked in a team that was rolling out agile methodologies across BT, not just in technology, across the whole of BT, which is 100,000 employees.
Yeah.
So these things is something I've learned. Agile, Scrum, so many other things. Working in squads, working in sprints.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All of
Yeah.
these things, the experience that you get from working in sprints and seeing how the Scrum Master works, seeing how the Agile coach works, very, very important. And the fact that you pick it up from such a young age, it's like your default working way of working is Agile way of
Mm.
working, right?
What would you say? I think one thing I want to mention quickly: stakeholder management is like another level of completely different level of customer service. So with customer service, you only focus on
Mm,
the customer, where stakeholder management, you're focused on
yeah,
everyone that has an interest in what you do. So that could literally be your
interest, yeah,
manager, that could be the senior people, that could be even the customer, but it's on a much wider
yeah,
level. And it's one of those things you can pick up
hmm,
when you start to get in an environment and get a feel of what it's like and get
yeah,
a feel of what the aims are, the goals are, and the I guess the atmosphere. Then you kind of pick up, okay, how
mm,
do I liaise with this person? What's the most effective way
yeah,
to engage this person? And it's those little, it's very often buzzword you hear, but it's a very subtle skill that you pick up, and it's kind of how you manage the different people that are involved in your work in some capacity.
mm, mm,
Um, One thing I do want to, I think would be really interested to get insight on is how does a
mm,
sprint look? So you mentioned sprint. What does that?
yeah.
How can I picture that? How would you? Someone want to visualize that? How would you say it is?
So a sprint essentially is, in software terms, a sprint is basically a period of typically 2 weeks. It
Yeah.
depends on what the team wants, but typically 2 weeks. And during that sprint is basically when you want to create a software or an update for a software. And in that sprint, you basically work on that. And in the sprint, you have something called a stand up. So I believe you can have two stand ups a week or one stand up a week. We had two stand-ups a week in the beginning because we were getting used to it. So during those stand-ups, every single member of the team updates the team on what they're working on and how they're progressing. If there are any blockers, if there are any things that they're struggling with, etc., and if they need any help. And then you have a kind of Kanban board, which essentially is a board that has kind of to do things, updates for the software, things that are currently being worked on, things that have been done, and things that have been blocked. So you're updating this board live, and anyone can in the team can access that and see where the progress is going. So there's things in the backlog as well, which are not a priority right now, but a priority is to work on the to-do things that are on the to-do list. So during the stand-up, which is the weekly meeting, you essentially give an update on the tickets that you are working on as an individual to the team. And at the end of the sprint, which is the end of the 2 weeks, you have a retrospective, which is basically a longer call to update how the 2 weeks or how the sprint went. And you essentially talk about what went well, what could have been improved, what things we managed to do, what things we didn't manage to do, what things got blocked, how we can improve the sprint next time. So it's a much more efficient way of working, because essentially what happens usually is people are working in their silos alone, and the team doesn't know what each person is working. This way of working essentially brings everyone together on the same page, and you kind of update each other on everything, and no one is in the
Mm.
dark. And that makes working on a software kind of update or a new software much, much
It's
more
very
efficient, and you get
collaborative, isn't
much
it?
more done.
Very collaborative,
Very
and in
collaborative.
live time
There's
as
a
well.
huge emphasis.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Huge emphasis on collaboration. Very, very important. And it does kind of get you out of your shell.
yeah,
And it also kind of motivates you as well, because you want to get more done. Otherwise, if you're in a stand up and you say, yeah, I've got nothing done, it's a bit embarrassing, isn't
yeah.
it? So, yeah, it makes ways of working much more efficient.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. There's a lot of valuable insight in there in terms of how that apprenticeship is and how it is working in BT and the different ways of digital working. And I think if you go
Yeah.
back for to that listening to
Hmm.
episode 4 with Mansour Ahmed, he was on the fast stream, so he talks about being a delivery manager. And I think
Yeah.
thinking about blockers, I think his role as a delivery manager is to kind
Hmm.
of try to unblock those things and trying to deal with all the rubbish or the issues that come in. So it's
Yeah.
actually quite interesting to get that perspective and this perspective
Hmm.
from a software
Yeah.
um, apprentice. I guess it'd be good to move on to the application process.
Yeah.
So how was that for BT, and what advice would you give someone thinking, okay, the scheme sounds really good, but I just want some advice on how to navigate it and how can I be best prepared?
Right. So BT application process is fairly simple. I found it quite easy actually, um, in comparison to other applications. With BT, how it works is you go on the early careers website, I think bt.com/slash
Just
early
Google it, yeah.
careers. You just Google it, you'll find it, the first kind of result on there. Obviously, you look at there's a variety of schemes we have. It's not just software engineering. You have network engineering, you have cybersecurity, you have non-tech related stuff, you have HR, you have finance, you have accountancy, you have commercial management, you have so many other things. You have engineering roles, power engineering, electrical engineering. We have a multitude of kind of roles across BT, but the one I'm doing is software engineering. And to apply for that, you just find it. Yeah, it's a digital and technology solutions one, which should be fairly easy to find on the technology section. And you essentially apply. All you have to do is give in your CV, make sure your CV is updated. And then obviously the automated system ensures that the CV is at least decent, right? If you got a blank page, then of course you get rejected. So once you pass that stage, all the basic details, your name, your address, etc., your GCSEs, your A levels, all of that stuff. Once you submit that application and you get through that stage, you face an online test, and it's a very basic online test. It's a situational judgment test, which is essentially gives you a few scenarios, yeah, in a workplace, and you rank what response or what course of action you would most likely take in
Mm.
that situation. And for me, it was pretty logical. For some people, it may not be. It's, for example, a colleague of yours is working and they're finding their task difficult. You're a bit busy. What do you do? And then there's a variety of responses. The first response is tell them to worry about it themselves. It's their problem. The second
Don't
response
do that.
is find some time in your calendar to help them out, etc. Obviously, you wouldn't select the first option because that shows that you are not a team worker and you are a hindrance to the team. So it's about building a personality of you and how you would be in a
Yeah, and I think
workplace.
if you relate it to the job description and the values and all that kind of stuff, you can
Mm.
kind of get an idea
Yeah.
of what they're asking for. And I
Mm.
think if you Google a lot of practice ones, you can find that as well.
Hmm.
There's a lot of different
Yeah.
practice situation judgment tests. On your CV, did you put anything in particular that related to the software engineering apprenticeship, or was it just kind of who you are?
Um, yeah. So I didn't put anything software engineering related on my CV except that I was seeking software engineering roles. In terms of the skills, then I tailored the skills towards what they were looking for, which is leadership, teamwork, huge thing, collaboration. And also in terms of my experience, I had no tech experience at all.
Yeah,
No work experience in tech, no subjects that are related to tech. I ended up with Arabic economics and politics. There's no technology in that. Yeah. So I had no experience whatsoever in technology. And this reinforces the point that I discovered later on is that apprenticeship roles are not there for you to, they don't look at your tech experience or whether you have it or not. They look at the skills that you demonstrate and the kind of characteristics you demonstrate. Like I mentioned, the competencies, leadership, teamwork, etc. Now, in tech, there's a lot of collaboration. So if you demonstrate that you're a good team worker, that's an automatic attraction to the interviewer. So I made sure that I put those skills down. And also certain things like being head boy at secondary, that's not something major now anymore. And you wouldn't be talking about that in your interview for a job later on down the line. But that's something as an apprentice or as a potential apprentice is very, very big. Why? Because that shows you're a leader, a natural leader, right? So it's very important that you include these things because this is what's going to make your CV stand out, and this is what's going to make you as a person stand out in the interviews as
yeah,
well. So it's very important to have those skills down, and a lot of people don't really they worry about experience. It's not a massive. It's not. I mean, if you have experience, that's nice. You can talk a bit about it in interview, but it's not necessarily important as such, and it's not required.
yeah. And even stuff like
Yeah,
fundraising, charity, working in like local
very
communities,
important.
little things like that, that where you're
Yeah.
collaborating, where you're working in teams, where you're being that team
Mm.
player, that all adds up. And we
Yeah.
shouldn't like even understate that. And yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
something that people might often forget. But after the online stages, what was it then? So after
Mm.
the situation judgment.
So then, after the situational judgment test is a video interview, which is I find worse than actual interviews because you're talking to a camera. You're not actually talking to a real person. Like for example, this call, I'm talking to you, so it's easier for me to talk like a person. Whereas when you're talking to a computer or a robot, you end up being a robot yourself. So that's very important. And the video interview essentially is two, three questions asking about, for example, why do you want to join BT? A very open-ended question. There's a lot of answers to that. Demonstrate a time when you displayed leadership skills in your personal or work life. So these things, there's a lot of answers that you can give. The reason, the successful kind of answer to the first question that I mentioned, why do you want to apply to BT or why do you want to join BT, is you have to talk about BT. Don't talk about yourself. Yeah. You have to talk about BT. You have to talk about their values. You have to talk about the initiatives they've done. For example, I went on the corporate website of BT. You have the customer facing website, which is all their broadband deals, etc. Then you have the corporate website, which is for all the investors and then all the geeks that are looking at all the numbers and stuff. It doesn't look nice and none of it makes sense, but it's important you go on these sections of the website. Why? Because it shows you their vision, the Tech 2030 vision. You're not going to know that if you haven't researched the company thoroughly. Yeah. Barefoot computing campaign, the work ready program. These are all initiatives that BT are doing. And I knew of these initiatives before I even joined BT because I researched the company thoroughly. And I talked about these things in the video interview and in the actual interview itself. And when you talk about these things in the interview, automatically that gauges the attention of the person watching your video interview or the interviewer in your interview. Right. So it's very important to research these initiatives and talk about them and how they apply to you and why you want to contribute
Yeah,
to
and how
them.
it kind of align with your values and how it.
Exactly.
So
And
yeah,
how
if you
it
want to bring
aligns with your
yourself in,
values. Yeah.
make sure it aligns with what they're
Yeah,
after. Yeah,
exactly. So in that, I can remember the answer I gave. I talked about BT's values, which is personal, simple, brilliant. And I said in the interview that these are values that I believe in on a day-to-day basis. Simplifying things is not need to complicate things. You have to be personal. You have to understand the person you're talking to. You have to understand the context in which that is taking place. Yeah. And also you have to be brilliant at everything. We don't want to offer a mediocre kind of product or a
Yeah.
service. I always believe in brilliance in everything you're doing, whether that's helping your mum out in the kitchen. Don't do a half-hearted job of cutting the onions. Yeah. You have to be brilliant. So relating it back to the company and kind of explaining how you fit in and how you align with those values, that's a perfect answer in my
Yeah.
opinion. And that's what's going to really catch the attention of the person watching that interview.
Definitely. And after that, was it the assessment center?
That's correct, yeah. So after that, once you pass the video interview, it's a final stage, assessment center. Now, assessment center is basically a whole day where you go to their offices, one of their office, which is usually in Hatfield, but now they're closing that down. So I'm not sure where it would be, but essentially you go into their office, you see the office basically, and you kind of sit down and they give you an introduction, etc. And there's kind of three elements to it. I'm not sure if they've changed it a bit or not, but from my time there were three elements. The first one was a group exercise,
Typical.
the second one was a presentation to an interviewer, and the third one was the actual interview. And in all three of these elements and these aspects of the assessment center, you can shine. You can show what you're made of, and you can really demonstrate the research you've done, right? In the group assessment, it's very important that you're proactive, because if you stay quiet and the others are talking, you're automatically you failed that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you need to be proactive in that sense. And in the interview, again, like I mentioned, you're going to be asked questions about why you want to join BT. Why software engineering? You can't just say something like, "Oh, it was the only role I found, and I applied for it, and here I am." You're not going to get in. And it's funny to us because we know that's a stupid answer, but so many people give that
Lack
answer.
of prep in it. Lack of lack of
Lack of
prep. Yeah.
preparation, and it's just a lack of
Simple
preparation.
preparation, but it can be forgotten very easily.
Very simple, very simple. All it takes is it took me 15 minutes to research BT and know the company inside out. Well, not inside out, but something where I could talk about in the
Yeah.
interview. Yeah. And so even when you research the company, you realize that this is something you actually want to work for. You're not just applying for the sake of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's important as well because I've had experiences
Yeah.
where I was applying for an apprenticeship, like these random
Mm.
ones. I went to the interview. I left the interview thinking, like, I don't want this job. Like,
Yeah.
even before that, like, I wasn't 100% sure. And I think for me,
Mm.
I struggle to do things that I'm not focused on or I'm not passionate about or something
Mm.
like that. So when it came to things like
Yeah.
that, I realized, you know what, if I want to do it, I need to be interested. Because that shows if you're
Mhm.
not interested, if you're just going it for the sake of it, it's going to show and you're going to be exposed. So you need to generally
Yeah.
be on it and quite keen. What was their presentation like?
Right. So the presentation essentially is you're given a brief 1 week before the interview and you're told to prepare it. My presentation was on, one of BT's vision or mission statements is to make the world a better connected place, more interconnected. A very open-ended task. That's our vision. Create a project or create a thing or a product or a service that would fit in with that vision, right? So I decided to obviously I want to go into artificial intelligence. So I decided to essentially do something on that. Now they've given you, it's a very helpful brief. So you're told what to cover and what to hit and what not to talk about. So you essentially talk about the product or the service that you're creating. You also talk about, what's required, what technologies are required for that product. So there's a little bit of tech involved. Very simple, nothing too complex. You talk about, for example, you need artificial intelligence, you need I don't know what other technologies are there. You need, for example, the programming language
Mm.
Python, etc. Uh, and as you're talking in this presentation, they're really seeing and they're assessing how you work your way through a project and what your approach is. They also ask you to give a time scale of when you would do these things. They'd also ask you to justify why you're taking a certain decision. Why, for example, why this product? What benefit is it going to
Like, see,
give?
they're delivering major priorities, decision making. I can see
Yeah,
those skills coming out. Yeah, 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 yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So automatically, a whole host of skills are being assessed. You know, it's at the end of the day, a business is a business. They want to make money. That's their objective. And if you feed into that, and you show that you're trying, or that's something you are capable of doing, bringing back value to the company, there's nothing stopping you from getting the role, to be honest.
It's understanding that as well,
Yeah.
and just knowing that. I think sometimes you can forget the value element and just focus more on BT wants to do this, BT wants to do that. But then, how do
Yeah.
you, as a person, relate to that goal, and
Mm.
how do you contribute towards that? And it's not hard once you do your homework and your preparation, and
It's not.
honestly,
Mm.
like, it is possible to do. And I think that's probably what the key ingredients that you've had to your successful applications in
Yeah.
different fields, not just with the software engineering. And when it comes to
Yeah.
presentations, I would, if someone is struggling with that, then I would normally suggest, even if you can record yourself on your laptop doing it, and just speak, or
Mm.
even speaking in front
Yeah.
of or recording yourself speak, just get comfortable being fluent. That goes a long way, because if you just,
Yeah.
like me, a few years ago, if I was that shy guy and I didn't want to, speak out at all, and I didn't prepare for it, and I just went straight into there, then I don't think I would have
Mm.
done as well. I would probably just end up talking, because out of that
Yeah.
pressure and not really understanding what I'm saying. So I think really,
Mm.
even ideally have someone to do it with, but if not, you can get on phone camera and literally record yourself talking and doing it, and just get
Exactly.
comfortable, and it helps a lot. It honestly helps a lot. Just step
Yeah.
out the comfort zone and do it.
It does.
It's not difficult.
That's actually something, in my interview preparation, and I have to really mention this teacher, my economics teacher. She really instilled this belief back into me. Her name's Miss Elmi. Um, she helped me a lot in my application process. For a whole week, we done mock interviews before my assessment center. And believe it or not, I was unable, when we first started off my first interview, I was unable to put a sentence together without stuttering.
It's fine.
So I was really, really bad at interviews, right? I've never done an interview in my life at that stage, and I was absolutely atrocious,
And it's
right?
fine to be, as
Um,
long as you work on
yeah,
it.
and exactly. And what she done was she made me record those interviews in front of her. So she would put my iPad facing me, and she would start asking me questions. And I actually still have the clips in my
I'd
iPad
love to watch
now.
it.
I don't think those will be released anytime soon. But it, it, I saw the difference over just 1 week. It's all about practice, practice, practice. A lot of the times, it's not even the content or the stuff that you're saying or the things that you've researched. The problem is the delivery of it. And like anything, you get better at the delivery the more you practice the delivery, right? So we done mock interviews for a whole week, and in the end, alhamdulillah, I got better at it, and I was much more confident in the actual assessment center itself. So it's like you mentioned, record yourself, see the difference, and it might be cringy seeing yourself, watching yourself do an atrocious interview, but it has to be done.
Yeah,
This is the stuff that really enhances your interview skills, really kind of takes you to another level. Even if you're not comfortable recording yourself, go to a mirror and start talking to the mirror. Be comfortable giving eye contact to
mm,
yourself. Yeah, that's very, very important, because if you can't give eye contact to yourself in the mirror, then you won't be comfortable giving eye contact to the interviewer, and they will automatically realize that there's nerves behind those eyes.
yeah. And I think it's
So it's
okay
very
to
important.
feel that way. And I can speak
Yeah.
for myself. If you look at my first
Mm.
video on my YouTube channel, that's like me, like first time speaking to a camera without no one responding. You can
Mm.
see the awkwardness. I was trying to get through
Yeah.
it, but then now with practice comes
Mm.
ease. And I think if
Exactly.
you look at my more recent videos, you see there's been an improvement. I hope, like, if people see it now,
Mm.
and I think it comes with that practice. And like in, I think, episode 3, Muhammad Arshad mentions, how do you build confidence with competence? And competence is practicing,
Exactly.
and that is literally
Hmm.
the key. And I think if you do that, then you're only going to go towards the right way and success. I guess to get towards the final few questions,
Mm.
what key skills would you recommend? So say I'm interested in now in doing a software engineering apprenticeship or something
Mm.
digital. From your experience so far, what are there any particular resources or things that you would suggest for somebody to go and learn? And generally, like within BT or even like the wider career in software engineering, what
Mm.
would you say?
So, in terms of the technical side of things, I wouldn't really emphasize on that too much. I mean, I know quite a few people who've learnt programming languages like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or Python or something like that. That's really good, excellent. You're actually on a better kind of position than I was at your stage. But the most important thing here is to realize the skills that you have, and I summarize those skills with leadership, good communication, teamwork, time management, and working under pressure. If you nail those five things and you demonstrate from your life, whether that's at school, whether that's at work, whether that's in your personal life, if you demonstrate examples for all five of those things and you stick to those examples, there's nothing stopping you from getting into an apprenticeship scheme. And what I mean by examples is my teacher, Miss Elmi, she made me write down these five skills, and next to them, I decided on where or when I demonstrated these skills. So, for example, with leadership, I discussed my head boy duties in secondary, communication skills, maybe talking about an event that I hosted in secondary. So nail down all of these examples for each competency. Now that way, what that does is it gives you confidence, because when you're asked that question in the interview, demonstrate a time when you showed leadership skills. You already
Got
know
a
the
real
answer.
example, not a waffling one.
You've already got it in your head, so you're not
Yeah,
going to be waffling at
yeah,
all in the answer. All you have to do is now deliver it, and that gives you a lot of confidence in the interview. So that's number one. That's the biggest advice I would give to anyone applying for apprenticeship schemes, is do that. Very, very important. And don't limit it to just these five. There can be so many more. There can be 10. And also be clever about it, because sometimes the interviewer may not ask any of these five. They may ask a different one. So use open-ended examples where they can be used for other competencies as well. For example, organizing an event in school, an end of year graduation event, you can use leadership, you can use organization, you can use communication as well. You can stretch it, so tailor it to that, and you can stretch and bend those examples when the interview
yeah.
comes.
And sometimes it's simple things like, if you're struggling with an example, literally get out of your house, find like a local charity. Like there's so many charities you can work
Yeah,
with.
do
Do
something.
something. Just get out of
Yeah,
your house and do something. Take the initiative,
exactly.
because then you're going to find,
Yeah,
maybe you're working with a youth charity or any charity fundraiser, and you take the lead on a little project. Bam,
mm,
that's potentially a leadership example there. Or maybe you're working in a team to raise a
yeah,
X amount for a certain goal or target. That's another one. Then I think there's a very easy win we can do, and really being smart about it and looking at what ways are there, whether it's in college, whether it's in university, whether that's in or wherever you are. Like, is there something I can,
mm,
even in the mosque, is there anywhere I can just come out, get involved in an
yeah,
activity, and think, how can I relate it to these things? Like, if we've got a deadline, how can I make sure that I'm helping the team deliver the objectives to hit that deadline? Because that's in some form time management. And if you're working
yeah,
under pressure, we got different challenges. For example, let's say you're waiting on somebody to come in to be the person that's going to lead the fundraiser, and they're not coming in. They're bam. How did you react to that? What did you kind of do? And these are just little hypothetical ones, but just to help the listener to think. You know what? It's not impossible to build these examples. It's not. You just take
it's
the
not. Yeah,
initiative, and you'll find words around you to do it. And inshallah, it shouldn't be too difficult. I'm conscious my
inshallah.
laptop battery is about to die, but
Oh,
no, it's cool. It's around time, if anything. Um, One
perfect.
thing I guess in terms of like final words and reflections,
Mm.
what is there anything that you want to share with anyone, any young Muslim listening to this?
Um, Young Muslims, yes. I come from a background of Islamic schools slash madrasa kind of backgrounds, and a lot of times people look down upon these people or students from these schools, and they think, you know what, because they go to an Islamic school, they're disadvantaged. The only thing they can become is an imam or whatever. Yeah, but that's not actually the case. I've come from a background where I've had to take I've had to be proactive from day one. For example, at GCSEs, my school has helped me immensely, my secondary school, and I'm very, very thankful for the efforts that the teachers put in. Absolutely amazing teachers, and the opportunities that they've given. But it's not a state school. It doesn't have the same resources. It doesn't have the same funding. So there's always going to be a shortfall, which means you as a student, I as a student, I had to put in that extra mile, that extra bit so that I could get good results in my GCSEs. And the fact that I done that from such a young age, I mean, I had to, otherwise I would fail my exams. The fact that I had to do that from such a young age is what's kind of built me and kind of taken me to this step. You understand? So it's very important to understand that even if your background isn't from the best school in the world or the best college in the world, there's nothing stopping you.
Also
Absolutely
the
nothing
mind.
stopping you. It's all the
Yeah.
mentality, it's all the attitude, it's all the way you perceive yourself, it's the demeanor you give to other people. And mentality is very, very, very important. Yeah, very important. I mean, even if you look at the higher end, if you look at these CEOs and these billionaires, etc., some of them, their background was a background of poverty. They weren't advantaged in that sense, right? But they did make it. Why? Because they had a lot of hard work behind them. Their mentality was there. They never gave up from day one. They never gave up. Even if you have failures, that's a part of the process.
Yeah.
The journey isn't a straight line. There's zigzags and there's blockades. It's part of the journey.
And
So
as
yeah,
Muslims, we should really take that on board and use that, because we know our deen is, the personal development tool. Our deen teaches us to be the best. So we shouldn't be aiming
exactly.
low.
Yeah.
We should be aiming
Yeah.
high, no matter what the barriers are. 'Cause look at history. There was many
Yeah.
barriers, but look at the results.
Mm,
With the right mindset, the right attitude, and with the right spiritual element as well. Doing it for the sake of Allah fundamentally. Then
exactly. Yeah. It all ties in together. And like you mentioned again, being successful in this life isn't frowned upon in Islam. In fact, it's encouraged. You need to be successful, but not at the expense of your akhirah,
yeah,
right? So why not be successful at both? Yeah, they go hand in
yeah,
hand, really. If you're successful in this dunya, do it for the sake of Allah. The money you gain, spend it for the sake of Allah. The skills that you get, help out young Muslims. Very, very important. These things, they kind of go hand in hand with each other. Be successful in both. And I think a lot of people separate
it's
the
not
two.
it's not
Don't
deen versus
separate the
dunya,
two.
is it? You can
No,
achieve
it's not.
the
You need to
yeah,
achieve
yeah.
both. You can achieve both. Very important. Mentality, like we mentioned again, mentality. This mentality needs to shift away from, having the two against each other, but, using both of them in tandem with each other. Very, very important. And once you have that balance, there's nothing stopping you from being successful in this life and the next, inshallah.
And with that, we'll end on that gem. 'Cause my battery's flashing as well. No, but seriously, Jazakallah khair, man. This, I think, is going to be a really beneficial episode, especially for someone that's just sort of left college recently. It's in the first year of the degree apprenticeship, to have this sort of mindset, and people can really listen and take this on. Like, this is somebody that's just started their apprenticeship, and it's going to be the year in. And with this mindset, I think,
Mm.
inshallah, you'll go very far. But I think people should really listen and take this on and think, how can I embed this in? And using all the advice that we've given, the insight that we've given, really think, okay, how can I now look to embed some of this in? What experiences can I look to build, to make a good
Mm.
application or whatever? And how can I also go into the right mentality? Because I think that's one thing we really emphasized in this episode. And yeah, inshallah, I think people really listen to this and reflect and, take the lessons on board. Then, it's up to you.
Mm.
If you've noticed that there was a sudden cut off, it's because my battery did die. But alhamdulillah, the laptop was still recording. And I plugged it in, and we're back. But it's just to end off with, yeah, really embedding the mentality that Brother Umayr has mentioned, and taking that on. And if you do the steps that we mentioned in terms of preparing for your application, whether it's a degree apprenticeship, whatever it
Mm.
is you want to do, then yeah, I think the only way for you is going to be success. After practicing and making those mistakes, it's fine, but it's part of the journey, isn't it? And that's how it
Definitely.
works. It's never going to be something that comes to you straight away. It's going to take a bit of time, but with the right mindset and learning from each failing, it's going to go
Mm.
the right way, inshallah.
Definitely, inshallah.
Yeah. But with
Yeah.
that, we'll end the recording here. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, bro.
Allah khair for having me and giving me this opportunity. Hopefully, it is benefit to the Muslims. And like I said, if anyone needs any help, then sure, approach me. No problem in that, inshallah.
Inshallah.
But yeah, Jazakallah khair for having me, and hopefully we speak soon, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Excellent. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you found this episode useful. If you did, please leave a thumbs up on our YouTube channel, and please do subscribe. It would really help us. And if you do know of others that are in a similar position, similar age group that would really benefit from this podcast, please do share it with them. We're really keen to get this content out there and widen the reach and engagement. So by sharing it with someone that you know, it would go a really long way in helping us and also helping the individual with getting the best careers advice and helping them prepare for whatever career it is that they want to go for, because there's a lot of advice and guidance that we touched upon in the episode that will help anyone. So by sharing it, you'll really be doing them a favor and also doing us a favor. Jazakallah khair.